Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We do ask that you please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and our speaker will be happy to address any questions or comments at the end of the program. If you're joining us over Facebook Live, welcome to you as well. Our Facebook audience can also ask questions using the comment section on Facebook. We'll be monitoring those comments and answering the questions at the end of the program as well. Please note that the talk is being recorded and streamed live and will be posted to our social media channels once the talk is over. And if you would like to rewatch this talk or previous virtual talks, please check out our Facebook page. And I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Florence Gilman, who's a docent with the Timken, and she's going to give an amazing lecture today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Florence.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you for joining in today. I expect we should have a pretty interesting conversation. And I will take a couple questions here and there. So if you think of something, jot it down. And yeah, let's get into this. I gave this lecture the title of The Wheels That Did Not Go Round, Round, Round. And you notice that I put round, round, round in single quotation marks, just in case it rings a bell with anybody. My little granddaughter, who's not quite 2, goes to preschool and has learned a song about school buses. And it's one of these songs we would call it a little ditty. It's a song that is very catchy, and it's all about school bus wheels going round, round, round. So little Anna sings this song very easily. And I found out from a preschool teacher in another place that the children in her preschool are also really captivated by this little song about the wheels going round, round, round. I guess that's what made me decide that a question I've always had about wheels and art, well, that this would be a good question to pursue right now, just for fun. So I've always had the question about why St. Catherine in art is always connected with a wheel. And St. Catherine is, I would say, a rather obscure saint in some ways, although when you start to look at the art about her, she's not that obscure after all. But anyway, everyone who mentions St. Catherine or talks about her, refers to her, it's always about wheels. So this is what got me into wheels. And I decided, well, this is a good time to figure out what's going on with St. Catherine. And also, there are 2 paintings at the Timken, which you see on this pastiche on the title page here, the one on the top left and the one on the bottom. Both of these paintings at the Timken have St. Catherine. So that also attests to her popularity, because out of the some 75 paintings on exhibit at any one time, if two of them have St. Catherine, well, there was something going on with her. There was some reason she was pretty interesting. So let me tell you what I have found out and find interesting. So this is one of the 2 paintings that Timken has. It's in the Italian gallery. It's absolutely gorgeous, of course. And this is Mary, the mother of Jesus, with Jesus. And on her right is her cousin Elizabeth, who was the mother of John the Baptist, who is the other small child in the painting. I hope you can see my cursor. So on the right then, this beautiful person on the right, beautiful woman, is St. Catherine. And she's very elegant. That's one clue to her. But also, I think, I'm not positive, but I think right down here at the bottom, under her left knee, I think that's supposed to be part of a wheel. I'm not positive and I haven't been able to verify it, but I think it might be. Maybe if any of you know that, you docents, let me know in the chat if that is. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So this is one painting I had a question about, why St. Catherine, and how do art historians know it's Catherine? Then also at the Timken is this beautiful but rather small triptych. And this is also in the Italian gallery. Niccolo di Buonaccorso painted this, as you can see, in the 14th century. And that's St. Catherine down there on the left. So I did a detail of her, which I'll show you in the next slide. So I extracted that and put it over here on the left. The digitization is not that great, but you can see already some of the attributes of St. Catherine, which are the wheel and what do you call it? A palm frond, which is a sign of a martyr. And then she has sort of a crown with a halo behind it. So that attests, that's the artist's way of showing that she was also considered royalty. Well, so these were the only two St. Catherines I could find in the Timken, but actually, as I said, 2 out of 75, that's kind of pretty good odds. So let's see what we can put together about her. This is the Getty's, one of the Getty's St. Catherines. And by the way, there's a lot of St. Catherines, so you always have to denote them by their place. In her case, it's Alexandria in Egypt. And in theirs, I believe this is a parchment page, probably of a book. And you can see the wheel, of course. You don't see the palm frond here, but what you also see is what we will notice is an attribute is right up here in the left corner. There's a statue of Mary and Jesus. So often when you see Catherine, you also see Mary and Jesus, and that will become clear too. Let's see. Okay, I gotta go down one here. My page is not advanced. There, okay. So Catherine's story is centered around Alexandria in Egypt. This is the best map I have closest to her period. This map is about 80 years after her period, but it's the best I have right now. So this map shows the diocese of Egypt. So the Roman Empire had divided regions into dioceses. You usually only hear that word anymore with church diocese, but these were civil dioceses, and she's in the Diocese of Alexandria. And so also over here, let me remind you that this is the Sinai Peninsula. And so this is her field of action, you might say. So everything we'll be talking about happens between Alexandria and the Sinai Peninsula. Now, if you have listened to some of my other lectures, you're going to say, she's always talking about Egypt. Well, actually, more recently, that's true. And it's the Timken's fault because of the various paintings I've seen there and decided to pursue. So that has led me to ancient Egypt, and I'll say more about that. But believe me, it's pretty interesting stuff once you start working on ancient Egypt from the perspective of Christianity and Judaism, which were very vibrant there in the early Roman period. Okay, let me tell you Catherine's story, okay? So she lived early in the 4th century in Alexandria. She was born during the reign of the Roman Emperor Maximian. And she died under the reign of his son, Maxentius. And that's kind of confusing in itself. But yeah, so she's born under one Max and she dies under the other Max. That's father and son. She was the daughter of the governor of Alexandria, so that meant she was well off, and in her case, she was well educated. That's not surprising for Alexandria, because you may know the story of the Great Library of Alexandria. You may know the story of various famous philosophers, both Jewish and Christian, from Alexandria. This was a real center of learning, not to mention also the very famous pagan, what we call pagan philosophers, such as Hypatia of Alexandria. And Hypatia, in many ways, is a kindred type of spirit with Catherine of Alexandria. Not that they knew each other, but that they dealt with the same patriarchal setup in that area of their country. So she's a scholar, and therefore she's often represented with a book too. And as far as religion went, she was brought up with the usual Roman gods and so on. But at 14, she met a beggar type person who converted her to Christianity. And sometime after that, the story goes that she had a vision of the Virgin Mary and Jesus, and that the infant Jesus gave her a ring. So this led to the idea that she was the bride of Christ. This was like an idea of a mystical marriage, which other saints had that similar idea here and there too. So sometimes actually in paintings of Catherine, she's pictured with the baby Jesus putting a ring on her hand. And we'll see that as we go on here. Therefore, she refused to marry. She also converted many people. And because she was effective, she got a lot of attention from various Roman authorities who did not like what she was spreading, Christianity. Now, we could spend a whole day talking about why the Romans didn't like Christianity. They also did not like Judaism. But Judaism was so ancient that they had somehow reached, you might say, a rapprochement with Judaism. They could coexist. That was okay because Judaism was ancient. But Christianity, as soon as they could distinguish it from Judaism, seemed to them like a new religion, and they didn't like that, and therefore it was illicit. So people who spread Christianity were people that they didn't like. And this got a lot of people into trouble. It created, on the Christian side, a lot of martyrs. And this is what Catherine gets caught in. So she ended up getting martyred at age 18 during a period when the Romans were especially here and there persecuting Christians. By the way, the Romans did not persecute Christians all the time, everywhere. So the persecutions tended to be sporadic in terms of times and places. In any case, under Maxentius, the persecutions flared up, and she ends up dying during this one. So let me tell you more of the story. As you see, he's there in the upper right corner. We are very lucky to have so many busts of Roman emperors. One day in Florence, Italy, I was wandering around the Uffizi Art Gallery. There's a whole long hallway. Some of you are nodding. There's a whole long hallway of Roman busts, emperors, philosophers, and so on. It was like I was in a room with all my friends, except they were all stone. But what an experience to wander down a hallway of busts of heads. Truly too fun. Well, Maxentius decided to have her cross-examined and hopefully have her change her mind about Christianity. So he summoned 50 philosophers to debate with Catherine. Now, it wasn't hard to get 50 philosophers in Alexandria, because that's the whole point. Alexandria was a city of scholars. It was the equivalent, the library was the equivalent of a huge modern university. They didn't use that word. They didn't have that word yet. They're kind of an institution. What they had was a library. And if you wanted to learn, you went there and attached yourself to the scholar who knew what you wanted to learn. In any case, the story is that the philosophers lost the debate. And not only that, that they were converted. So then Maxentius martyrs, kills the philosophers. So Catherine was still alive, and Maxentius promised her if she would just recant what she had been teaching, that she could be his co-ruler. Well, that was extraordinary. To think that an Egyptian could be his co-ruler, even the Romans didn't even want to have Cleopatra as a co-ruler. So much less Catherine. They disliked, quote, women from the provinces. And so anyway, he promises her this promise that he would have had trouble carrying out anyway. She did not want it, and she refused. So then she was whipped and she was imprisoned. So totally frustrated with her, he decided to, well, meanwhile, his wife becomes a Christian. And so he puts his wife to death. Meanwhile, then, having defeated the philosophers, which is what this wonderful triptych is showing. This triptych is in Southampton near London. It's a Van der Weyden, and it's representing, of course, the 50 philosophers with Maxentius on the right and Catherine in the center. You see some of her attributes here. For example, the sword, he will eventually behead her. So the sword is an attribute, and a book. And usually when it's a book, it's a big tome. It's not like a small little prayer book or something. It's usually representing a big book, more like a scholarly book, because this is Catherine. Yeah, so going back to the Timken's Veronese for a minute, let's notice that, let's just repeat a couple things here. So yeah, here we see Catherine again with the idea that she's the bride of Christ. Now this idea becomes known as the mystical marriage of Catherine and Christ, and is a whole theme that we keep coming back to here. Okay, now Veronese painted another painting of St. Catherine, and in this one, it's a little hard to see, but well, I think the position of her right hand shows you that she's holding out her right hand with her fingers slightly apart to receive the ring. So he did this one some 5 years later than the previous one. And in this one, that's what he wants your eye to go to. So her hand is actually probably out of proportion and rather big. And as I say, the fingers are spread, and that's because the infant is putting a ring on her ring finger. Veronese had incredible talent in portraying material. So while we're on this picture, look at the dress that she is wearing. And also look over here at this kind of angel figure, maybe. Look at the quality of that silk and so on. So This is gorgeous, gorgeous material that he has put into these paintings. Okay, this picture has kind of an interesting history. It was an altarpiece in a Venetian church. So a Venetian church of Augustinian nuns, but Napoleon took it. And when Napoleon occupied Venice, so it didn't go back. It didn't come away from the government until at the end of World War I, when the government transferred it to the gallery in Venice, which is where it is now. So she also gets called Queen. Notice Veronese has placed a crown on her head, and did in the other Veronese, the one in the Timken. Queen is kind of a stretch. She's a royal family. She's a very upper class family. Her father's a governor, so I don't think she actually would have had the title Queen. But in any case, that's trying to show her status. Okay, now Maxentius, when Maxentius couldn't either convert her or persuade her to stop being Christian, he decided to kill her on a cruel means of torture. And this is where the wheels come in. So he had an engine built that had spiked wheels. So we must envision it as some type of tongue and groove type of wheels that you could work you could work it by twisting one wheel, and that wheel would twist the other, and so on. A very, very cruel torture machine. And just the sight of it was supposed to scare her into submission, except it didn't. It would have killed her very, very slowly as it went around and around and around. Lucky for her, according to the story, an angel appeared, destroyed the engine, and made its fragments fly apart. So, and perhaps, as the story says, killed various pagan bystanders. So the wheel then, in attributes to her, usually, I can't say always, but many, many times, is a broken wheel or a partial wheel, showing a fragment of it. So having survived that, Maxentius decided to behead her. And that is why she's also shown with a sword. So then the tradition is that not blood, but milk flowed from her body. So some type of symbolism that even in death, she remained life-giving. And this was what really mattered to people in the medieval world. That her final prayer was that Christ would grant the requests of those in need if they asked for help due to pestilence, famine, illness, calamity, and also for healthy air and fruitful harvests. Now that covers a lot of human needs, right? And therefore, she became very popular. So this is what was especially passed on about her as a martyr, that she in a sense negotiated, you could say, that yes, she's going to die, but will Christ promise to grant those prayers, those needs? So this undergirds her popularity. This idea that you go to Catherine if you want God to help you. Now, the story also developed in the direction that it was said after her death in Alexandria, angels carried her body to Mount Sinai. The unusual term that is used when you talk about moving saints around, moving relics around, is translated. I really don't know exactly why we use that term, but we do. So anyway, the translation of Catherine happened, taking her body to Mount Sinai. So let's look at her intercession. She becomes really popular in the period of the Black Death in the 14th century. And Catholics in Germany especially developed a list of 14 saints that would really help you. And of course, in desperation, people needed this help. The most recent estimate I've read of how many people died in the Black Death and the bubonic plague is 50 million. Okay, so how many people died in the recent pandemic? Does anybody offhand know the figure worldwide? How many people died? Anybody know? Put it in chat if you do. Obviously, it's in the millions, but I should have looked that statistic up. Well, anyway, nowhere near 50 million. So this was awful. And so these 14 helpers this list was developed, and people prayed to these saints. Okay, so Catherine's number 13 of the 14. And they were like this league of spiritual power you could tap into with devotion raging around Europe. This is a Bavarian painting. I have not been able to find either the painter nor the current location, but this is the type of thing that people would have been shown and taught. So these are across the bottom. These are the 14 holy helpers. And you see Catherine's right over here. She's number 13. And you can see just a trace of the wheel here. See it? Okay, now, she was not the first person to be punished on a wheel, and nor the last. The use of the wheel extended well into, I believe, well, as you can see here, even the 18th century. And it was especially used in Europe. So I put this picture in because it's the frontispiece of a cheap little book called a chapbook about a murder of a man who was probably falsely accused, again in religious conflict, this time between Calvinists and Catholics in France. So that isn't the story. The story is to illustrate what the wheel was like in this period and in this frontispiece. So yeah, this is one illustration, and here's another one. This is a German illustration, and here you can see that the wheel is you can see it's used differently. Here it will go around vertically, and here it will go around horizontally. So cruel minds figured different ways to use this brutal, excruciating technique, which the person would die from being so mutilated by the wheel going around. Now you can see more about wheels in this painting. This is a Bergignon, and this is in London in the National Gallery. And this one's pretty early as Catherine paintings go, 1490. And you see her on the left here. And you see her wheel here. I extracted the wheel here in a detail because the artist has actually shown how brutal it was. You see the metal around the outside. So it wasn't in the pictures we've been looking at from the 1700s. This had been going on since antiquity, so it wasn't something new, and it was widely used, especially in France and Germany. So yeah, as I said, it would mutilate the person terribly. It would break their bones, crush them. If you survived it, people would describe you as broken on the wheel. So we can only imagine the terror and the excruciating pain that people went through. So they were lashed to the wheel, and then it was turned around and mutilated them terribly. Okay, this is Raphael's gorgeous Catherine of Alexandria. This is the third painting on the pastiche, or the first slide of this. This too is in London. Here you see where he is placed the wheel. I think it would be good right now to take maybe 1 or 2 questions. I'm trying to see if there are any questions or comments. No? Okay, then we'll keep going. Now, after Catherine's death, in some of the accounts, the medieval accounts, there was a reference that her body was taken to a monastery at Mount Sinai. Even earlier accounts just said she was taken to Mount Sinai. And the idea was that angels had taken her there after her martyrdom and buried on the top of not Mount Sinai, but itself, but a neighboring mountain, Mount Catherine. And it was said that her tomb smelled beautiful, and that if you went there, there was healing to be had. So somebody's just asking me in chat where I got all the information about her. I'll tell you in a bit about one source. It's not the Golden Legend as the person asked, but I'll tell you in a minute. Most of it I got from standard research on Alexandria and the backgrounds of the iconography of Catherine. Okay, so a lot of pilgrims started to go to Mount Sinai to climb Mount Catherine, to be near her. And that's another thing to discuss, because that's kind of lost in the modern world, that need to be near relics. We probably have a hard time even understanding it. But we have to think about what their lives were like and their fears and so on. There was a man, a monk named Simeon Pentaglossus. What a name, Simeon Pentaglossus. Must mean 5 tongues or 5 languages, right? Anyway, he went to St. Catherine's and he was able to persuade them, I don't know how, to let him have one of her fingers. And he took that then to Rouen in France, where a special church was built to host this relic of Catherine. And therefore people would go there. They wouldn't have to go all the way to the monastery at Sinai to be near her relic and to expect her help, her intercession. Now that church burned and that relic was lost. So that was the end of that story. This is a very famous painting now in Berlin. And this is one of various ones, angels translating Catherine's body. So the idea of taking her from Alexandria to Mount Sinai. Now notice that her head is intact. And that's important because there were various claims at times that her head was in the relics in Mount Sinai. All right, where's Catherine's story? So one of you already asked me that. It is not the Golden Legend, it's the Menologium, which is very similar to the Golden Legend. Actually, I can't say for sure that it's not in copies of the Golden Legend, but I think maybe the most developed account is in the Menologium. And that is about the late 10th century. That's a long time after she supposedly died in about 306. So some 600 years or more after her martyrdom supposedly happened. And a long time also after her relics were discovered, although that was closer to the period, the relics were supposedly discovered in 800. The monastery did not have the name of St. Catherine's before that. I don't know that it had a name other than the monastery, Mount Sinai. So after 800, it became known as St. Catherine's and still is today. By the way, it's probably one of the oldest Christian monasteries of the world. So these relics supposedly show that her hair was still growing and this oil or milky substance was still oozing from her body. So where is this? Over here in the Sinai Peninsula, right down about here in the mountains. You see the mountains here. So St. Catherine's is down there. I'm not sure if I ever told you the story in these lectures. I told you I've been really getting into this, because it's so interesting. But I've been interested in St. Catherine for 40 years. And a long time ago, I tried to go there. So I'm going to tell you this story quickly because I think some of you might relate to what I'm getting at. So when I was a graduate student, I went to Israel with my professor and various other grad students. And while in Jerusalem, we decided to go down here to St. Catherine's. It's so important for so many reasons. It has extraordinary collection of books, the icons. It has the most wonderful collection of icons probably in the world, maybe next to the Tretyakov in Moscow or something. And it's so old. It is also the place where the oldest copy of the complete Bible in Greek, so both Old Testament and New Testament is found here. Yeah, so I wanted to go. So in 1976, to go there, you had to fly down here to the port right over here. Sorry, my cursor's not behaving right. There's a port here called Eilat. Okay, and this is the Gulf of Aqaba or the Gulf of Eilat, depending on Arabic or Hebrew. So yeah, you had to fly in here, and then you had to rent a Jeep, and then you had to drive 8 hours into the monastery. So we talked to a tour person who could arrange to rent the Jeep, and he said, I can set you all up. And he said, but see, the teacher and the other 2 students that were going to go were men. So he said to me, I'll take you there. He said, but I'm not sure they'll let you in. And we only had so many days to do this. There was no time to buy a tent or get camping stuff. And I'm trying to think of what am I going to do if I get all the way here and I have to stand outside all night, and I'm scared of tarantulas and scorpions, and what am I going to do if I get there and I can't get in? And they'll let the men in. So I gave in and I didn't go. So my point is, I'm mad at myself. So any of you who have given a lot of thought to what women put up with may have some similar feelings that I do. I don't know why I gave in so easily. I'm kind of mad that when I had a chance to go there, I didn't do it. I could have stood outside all night, right? Maybe one of those men would have stood out there with me. Maybe there were no tarantulas around that evening. But do you ever get mad at your old self? Like, why did we accept the limitations that were laid out before us? Anyway, so I didn't get there. I didn't get there yet, but now you can get there. There's an airstrip there. You can fly in on a small plane. Maybe someone who's listening to this has actually done it. Yeah, you can fly in on a small plane. There's even I believe a little strip motel of a few units that you can stay. So things have changed. And then of course the monastery is very digitized now. So you can also encounter a lot of it online. Anyway, that's where St. Catherine was taken. This is the monastery. And it has been in recent years dangerous to go there because of the local equivalent of Al-Qaeda. This monastery is amazing though, because most of the people who work in the monastery are Muslim. The monks are Orthodox. Right now, I believe they're Greek Orthodox. In the past, they've been Russian Orthodox. But you notice that there's both a church tower and a mosque tower. So there's a mosque there for the workers, the people who help run the monastery. This is where the movie crew stayed for the making of the famous movie, The Ten Commandments. Remember that? And the movie crew demanded, if they were going to stay there, that they wanted some modern plumbing. So the monks didn't want to put in modern plumbing, but the movie crew persuaded them, and I assume paid for it and everything else. But after the movie was done, the story goes that there were some really bad years, and really bad years in terms of climate and insects and so on. And the monks blamed it on the plumbing, and so they took it all out. So yeah, there's lots and lots of stories about this unusual place. And over here, I think you can see, yeah, right here, see this structure right here? That's got a pulley inside. That's the old way to get in and out, was you were in a basket and they would pull you up by pulley and let you down by pulley. Again, they've had a door since the making of, at least since the door of the making of the Ten Commandments. Well, this is Catherine's Mountain. So right near, you see the other mountain over here? One is Mount Sinai and one is Mount Catherine's. So this is where her head and her left hand were taken and found in the chapel on the top. And then I think I put a picture in of this. Yeah, this is the chapel that was built up there, where her relics were translated. But eventually they brought them down the mountain and into the monastery where they are now. And in the monastery, they're in what's called the Catholicon, which is the main church of the monastery. That's the Orthodox term for that big church. So that's where they are now. So they have some really interesting icons of Catherine, but either I don't have sharp enough pictures, or the icons are showing their age and deteriorating somewhat. So it's pretty hard to read these icons. But generally, you know, I think this one you would call a Vita icon, which means you start up here and you go across, then you go back to the left, the right, left, right, left, right. But don't quote me on this one. Our St. Basil in the Timken, you do that. Okay. But I haven't been able to find anybody's analysis of this that verifies that for me with this one in case. But you can see certain ones of the events that we talked about. Like here's the 50 philosophers dying. Apparently this icon shows them burning. Here's the wheel down here in the lower left corner. And in the last one here's the sword about to cut off Catherine's head. So that's one of the ones they have. That one, 13th century. This one, I don't know. They've got this one too. I don't know any of the details. And this one's very hard to see too. Very aged, probably needs to be restored. One thing that's pretty interesting about this one now is, notice this on the right here. Here you got, she's crowned, so showing her upper class status. But look at this angel. The angel seems to be bringing a ring. Now, does that have anything to do with the ring the ring on her finger. And is that related to the picture above? I don't know. The last picture on this icon, you can see her being translated, but this is really interesting. Look at the angels use the wheel to translate her, I would say. So I would like to see this one up close too, or find a source of analysis. But that's among the ones they have at Mount Sinai. Let's see. I saw a chat here. I guess, okay, person's leaving. Okay, next, let's go. One more thing here. Just about done. Now, what is going on here? What is hagiography? All this that I've told you, all these stories I told you are what you call hagiography. Hagia means holy in Greek, graphe, writings, so holy writings. So this is not history, okay? Hagiography means stories of famous saints, sometimes other people, that for sure seems to be heavily legendary. You never can be quite sure if the person you're talking about was historical, has some historical basis, or is the person a composite of various people? It's just very hard to know. But usually if it's a story full of extraordinary things, you feel like, well, this has been legendarized. So truthfully, nobody knows if Catherine really existed. She's a saint with a whole story that may be legendarized. But she became very important, as I said, in the Middle Ages, especially as one of the 14 helpers. And her power was that she could help you. She could intercede with Christ, with God, and you needed that. So this leads me to one of my main questions, and that is, do you think we moderns, can we really even understand ancient or medieval attitudes towards saints? I mean, we enjoy the stories. The paintings are fascinating and beautiful, but can we really understand their mentality? See, I don't think we can. I think we live in a world with very good medicine that we can access with relative safety in daily lives. I don't think we can begin to understand how dangerous their world was, how sick you could get, and there was not even any treatment, much less cure. I don't think we understand how difficult their daily lives were in terms of danger. So we have to think about them when we try to think about why they were so focused or so interested in saints who could help them. See, I don't think we understand human desperation in the same way they did. We always have one more idea, don't we, of what we can do about something. And their world was really, really different. So saints function differently. I'll just show you the last few pictures. This one's gorgeous. This is the Caravaggio version of Catherine in Madrid. There you see the broken wheel, the sword, the martyr's palm. The palm might be resting on a book down here. I'm not certain. Very hard if you can't get close to these paintings, isn't it, to really see well. And I love this Artemisia. Those of you who listen to my lectures know I like Artemisia very much. This is extraordinary. I don't know whose private collection has this one. I wasn't able to find that out. Notice that she has a very big book. And that is so Artemisia. And she has like a kind of crown up here suggesting Catherine's upper class status. I think down here in the lower right, what do you think? I think that's a wheel. Again, it's really hard to see. And yeah, so yeah, she's got the wheel. It looks actually, maybe the wheel is this right here. It looks like the book is balanced on a wheel. And the surprised look on her face, yeah, maybe this is when she's having the vision. And yeah, an upward gaze like that often suggests divine inspiration. I'll end with this one. This is the Prados, one of the Prados, St. Catherine's. And this has got a lot of the attributes. So here you see the wheel, here you see the sword, here you see the palm frond. But what's different about this one is the head of Maxentius down here under her foot. So I believe this is supposed to be symbolic, because I did not see in any of the research anything about her having in any way caused his death. So it's probably more a symbolic woman stepping on the head of the man who tried to kill her. Yeah, so these are the various attributes that we've discussed. And let's see, I see a couple comments in the chat. Someone asked, are the stories a way of magical thinking to help people deal with difficult and unexplained life? Well, I wouldn't call them magical, but they're, yeah, of course. There's, and probably the people who told these stories in the Middle Ages, you know, they heard it from somebody, heard it from somebody, they're accepting it as genuine. We're the ones who are skeptics, I think. But yeah, she used to be listed as a saint of the Catholic Church, and she's been taken off the calendar because there's no, there was some discussion of putting her back on. I don't know if she is on or off right now, but that's the point. It's hard to decide if she's historical. I think certain scholars think she's a composite of a couple different people in Alexandria, including the pagan philosopher Hypatia, who was also killed for her teaching. So yeah, the stories were, of course, meant to inspire people, to help them find an intercessor who might be able to help them. And it would take a very interesting psychological analysis to tell us how to explain to us how prayer to her that seemed to be answered was answered, if it was, right? Okay, let's open it up for discussion, please. Please feel free to unmute and jump in if you want to.
Yeah, I have something to ask you, Florence.
Sure, Jane.
I'd love to talk about the Timken's paintings that have Catherine in them, because this is just such a fascinating story. But one aspect that I had heard somewhere was that Maxentius was attracted to her and wanted to sleep with her, and she refused, and that's why he was going to put her on the wheel, or why he eventually cut her head off. I hadn't heard the business about conversion, which actually makes a lot more sense. But had you heard what I just said?
Not really. I haven't seen it in any of my sources, but it's a very obvious assumption. And also, a lot of that assumption would come from his intense fury at her. Right. He's a spurned lover, right?
Exactly.
Is an easy assumption. So I can see how that could be part of the legend. The legend was told differently in different places too. Every place didn't have the same details.
Right. And the mystical marriage part, it comes from a different source, but again, I love the paintings of that where you actually can see the blue stone in one of the paintings, like with a magnifying glass when I was talking about her. And
Oh, you can, in one of the Timkens, you can see the blue stone?
not in the Timkens, no,
Oh.
one of the other paintings that I found on online. But
Oh,
if you look carefully, there's a little blue stone there. And I think it's written somewhere that that it was a ring with a blue stone.
oh, you're ahead of me on that. I did not know that. So yeah,
There are a lot of stories.
lots of stories. Yeah. And then they get conflated, you know, stories of one saint gets added to the other. And like I say, the philosopher Hypatia, who's incredibly interesting. I wish we had a painting of her because I'd like to talk about her. Like to do some research on her.
Give us a talk. You could give us a talk on her anyway, even if it doesn't have her.
Do we have a Hypatia? I don't know.
No.
She deserves to be. Oh, she deserves to be talked about a lot. She was really wonderful. But anyway, yes. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for all your comments in the chat that I'm seeing here. And yeah, so the wheel that did not go around. Yeah, it turned out to be an interesting piece of research. Okay, well, I'll say goodbye to you all. See you around the museum if you're a docent, and take care. Bye.
Thank you, Florence. It was
Florence.
wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. And with that, we will wrap up. And just to let everyone know, we do have another talk coming up next Thursday on the 27th. And the topic is going to be French neoclassicism to Impressionism. And again, we thank you so much for joining us and hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.